And hello, boys and girls, those who bounce in between. It's your friend, comrade Dankey, here streaming with our good friend and comrade Marxism Today. Welcome to the stream.
It's me, Diddy Kang. I'm here. That's me on the left.
Awesome. Yeah, it is so good to have you here streaming on my end. I hope it's not too amateurish. I'm still trying to work out the kinks of live streaming through OBS, but I feel like yesterday's stream was sort of a practice run, and so I'm still getting the hang of it. It might be a little rough around the edges, but I am just like Maoism. I am refining my approach through practice.
Through the rupture, we get the continuity. Yeah. We're getting to a qualitatively higher stage of streaming with OBS. Yeah, because you've moved over from StreamYard, wasn't it?
Yeah, StreamYard. Let's see. Some people said there's some crackles and pops in the audio, so I am adjusting that. Just give us a quick test 1 2.
Test 1 2.
All right. Audio
That's
is crusty.
I wonder if that's going through on my end or on your end, or if that's like your voice or just my voice. Maybe the people in the chat can let us know, because it might be a microphone issue, it might be a Discord audio issue, or it might be a headphone issue as well.
Who knows? There's no telling.
Who knows? But we can work it out if the people in the chat let us know. Let's hope. Yeah. I have high hopes on free parking. And especially the earphone guy. There's something about that name just it screams I know audio.
Let's see, it sounds like it could be from my end. That's what somebody said. So let me try to adjust my audio here. Someone says maybe someone can mute a mic to isolate the issue. So I'll go first.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear some crackling coming through on that. It's actually coming through. I can actually see it on the Discord call.
Oh, let's see. Bear with us, folks. It's a little bit rough. It's on my end. Jeez Louise.
How dare you have bad audio? Actually, you can just check in OBS, make sure that it's outputting your microphone rather than like a computer audio or your headphones audio or something.
Okay.
Just double check that and see.
Yeah, let me double check.
Beardington says it sounds like you may have a cable not plugged in properly.
Alright, I wiggled the cable. Hopefully that might fix it.
Shit, I think it actually did.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it might have just come loose.
Mostly. As it sounds to everyone else. Let's see, you got the chat working. That's great. It's better, but not perfect.
Better, but not perfect. Damn.
Are you using what sort of microphone are you using?
Oh, let's see. It's got an audio jack. It's not a USB one.
Okay.
Still crackles a little. Dang.
It wasn't crackling with your stream yesterday, so if you can figure out if there's something different that you did yesterday that you've done today.
I wonder if it's Discord. Dang, this is rough. this is rough, ladies and gentlemen. I was afraid that this would happen.
Oh no, it's the end of the world. All 11 people here are going to post this and clip it and send it everywhere, and our reputations will be tarnished forever.
Somebody says it seems to be gone. So all right, hopefully that fixes it. It's the CIA. They're trying to crash my stream before it even starts.
Deng Xiaoping's ghost gotten in. Silence.
Sleepy Joe was like, "Yeah, Dankey King's streaming. We gotta shut the whole thing down."
Yeah, he's still a little bit butthurt that I didn't let him on my stream. He knocked on my door the other day. He's still crying a little bit from that.
All right, but now that that seems out of the way, welcome Marxism today. Welcome to the Dankey King live stream. It's definitely amateur hour here on my end, but uh, hopefully that won't prevent us from having a good stream. At least I've gotten chat working. So it's a little rough around the edges, like I said, but I'm trying my best. I'm giving it the old Dankey King try.
Yeah, well, it's only the hardcore ultra leftists who expect a clear one linear path to perfect streaming. We understand as dialecticians that there's going to be steps forward and steps backwards, just as laid out in the Communist Manifesto on how to stream on communist YouTube channels. We understand we're not ultras.
That's true. That's very, very true. But yeah, so how are you doing today, Comrade Paul?
Yeah, well, I'm good, and just like you, I'm trying to get my nerves up. I'm trying to get nice and nervous by drinking a fuck ton of coffee, and hopefully that's going to, give me that nervous energy that people love listening to. I might need to go to the bathroom halfway through this, and that'll put me on edge a little bit more. So yeah, exposure therapy. It's probably better than getting pissed. I used to just drink a lot of alcohol on streams, but this is this is probably slightly healthier overall. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I too have some coffee, and I'm excited about this stream. And so let's just get right into it. I feel like we've got the preamble out of the way. We've corrected the audio hiccups as best as I can muster right now. And so
Let's do it.
let's just get right into the first question. So,
Let's get down and dirty.
Comrade Paul, so what got you into Marxism? And how did you come to be a Marxist-Leninist Maoist?
How did I come to be an ultra left, adventurous, LARPer? Cringe. Hang on, let me whip up the board from yesterday so we can do some bingo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll go back. So how did I get into Marxism? Well, historically, I did come from a very, like I had two very low wage working parents who were always struggling to get by. So that would have given me like a social kind of consciousness growing up. I witnessed British colonialism in the six counties in a very militarized way that it was. Because I was growing up in the 1990s, and he had some family friends up in the six counties up in Belfast, and so we'd be back and forth all the time, and you'd be just driving through, and you just have these fucking these British guns pointed at you all the fucking time, and it was just like, what the fuck is this? Why is this here? And this was before the peace agreement in 1998. So my childhood, that's one of the big things that I remember. Just being like terrified seeing these British soldiers like pointing these big fucking heavy duty assault rifles at me. I was like, what the fuck? Not at me directly, but generally pointed towards like the car that we're going in.
Yeah, that
So that would
sounds
have given me it was really intense.
yeah, that sounds very intense, and it sounds very scary. And I'm
For a
sure,
little kid,
right, I'm sure as a young child, just seeing that just sort of leaves an impression, a lasting impression on you.
Yeah, yeah. It was, and like I wasn't even living there. I was back and forth, like staying over and stuff like that. But yeah, like it takes about an hour and a half to drive from where I live to the occupied six counties. But needless to say, that did give very much a national consciousness, a consciousness of national oppression that was there, and so I always had like sympathies for republicanism and the Republican movements. I didn't come from like a particularly political household, like in terms of my folks. I was blessed to have both my folks for my childhood. My dad died, at the start of my 20s, but for 2 decades I did have both of them. They weren't super political. They were probably, I'd say, center left. They were sympathetic to socialism and sympathetic to republicanism, but they weren't like active. They weren't in parties or anything like that. They just vote and complain about how shit things were, and but that would probably lead me on this sort of trajectory. And when I was coming out of school, my last sort of years of school, when I was starting working, coming into the workforce, that was really when the crisis was happening, the financial crisis, 2007, 2008.
Mm.
So I went directly into the recession. That's all I knew. I didn't know that Celtic Tiger period that had come before, where there was apparently this great prosperity and everybody was having a great time. Like some people were having a great time, I suppose, but we we fucking weren't, and I fucking wasn't, you know. And so I was just working jobs. I was working like fast food through this for the last couple of years. I was in school and in college. Get out of college, working in factories, and then eventually went on to work as a teacher for a few years and did workplace organizing. Eventually got fired for that, which was a bit of crack, you know. But yeah, so that would have developed more of a social consciousness as opposed to just the national liberation style consciousness, you know. And I first joined a Marxist organization. It was 2016. There was a lot of changes in Ireland in the 2010s. You know, in 2015, we only legalized same-sex marriage in 2015, and 2018 was abortion. People don't realize how backward Ireland was. It's like
Whoa.
people don't realize that divorce was illegal until like the early to mid 1990s in Ireland.
Holy shit.
Contraception was illegal. Like all this shit, you know, like it was really heavily under the grasp of the Catholic Church as an institution. And so you did have this very kind of feudal kind of superstructure and very backwards and conservative, and that really bled through to all areas of politics. And it was only really in the 2010s that Ireland started to, join the modern world in many ways, and that politicized a lot of people. So coming out of this recession and this awful economic environment, a lot of people got radicalized, and I'd always been quite, I'd always been left leaning. I would say now I would say social democratic was where I started. At the time, I would have considered myself socialist, but you know what I mean, like that sort of democratic socialist, kind of Bernie Sandersy sort of, Jeremy
Right.
Corbyn kind of socialist. But I would say social democratic now. And yeah, that sort of changed in 2016 when I joined a Marxist organization and engaged in activism and started studying Marx and engaging in practice and theory and developing through the years. That would eventually develop into Marxism-Leninism. I went on to join the Communist Party and Connelly Youth Movement, and there were a lot of struggles in there over what to do. And again, it was following the dialectic of practice, theory, practice. Getting involved, getting out there, trying some of the initially, like in 2016 and 2017 and 2018. Through that sort of period, there was a lot more like electoral stuff. There was a lot of electoral work in the organization that I was involved with, and so there was testing out, seeing how far we can go with that, realizing the limits, and then realizing we have to go beyond those limits. And so then I became much more firmly rooted in Marxism-Leninism, and then seeing the limits of Marxist-Leninist organizations, the issues with how some can abuse things like democratic centralism, and there was a lot of struggle as a result of that, a lot of line struggle within the organization, and that pushed a lot of us towards Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, as we realized that there are actually solutions to all of these issues that we're identifying with the traditional Marxist-Leninist party. We can actually solve these issues through criticism and self-criticism and rectification campaigns. We can solve these through utilizing the mass line method of leadership, and I mean that within and without the organization, because, often when we think of the mass line method of leadership, we think of it as purely just being with the masses. You've got the vanguard party, and then you've got the masses, and you go to the masses and you take these unsystematized ideas, you bring it back to the party, put them through the magic Marxist-Leninist Maoist machine, and then bring it back to the masses, present it to them, and see, what do you think of this? We've got a solution to your issue. Do they accept it? Do they not accept it? Okay, if they do, proceed, and if they don't, back to the drawing board to see if you can improve it.
Right.
And that's generally how we think of it in terms of like from internal to external with regard to the party, but also within the party. You can use it, within a party framework between the rank and file and the leadership. You can also apply the same kind of principle there. And if you're not doing that, you just end up with, ultra-centralism. It's just whatever the person is in the leadership says, and their little clique or whoever it might be, and whoever can kind of, suck up to them and tell them what they want to hear. And there's no input from the rank and file, and you don't have a voice, and people just the organization becomes stultified and disconnected, not only from the masses but from the rank and file of the organization. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that I think that I'm not sure if it's fair to say that you had a similar experience, but I recall you having difficulties of your own within Marxist-Leninist organizations, and I'm not sure if you wanted to talk to that at all as well, because I think that there might have been a similar you
Yeah.
being involved in Marxist-Leninist organizations might have been a catalyst to pushing you towards Marxism-Leninism, Maoism, as you realized that there are solutions to these issues. You don't need to abandon Marxism-Leninism and just go become a liberal or a social democrat. No, we can actually go further and beyond that and look at, what's going on in the Philippines and what's going on in India and see how are they solving these issues. Do you think that's fair to describe
Yeah.
your development
Yeah,
style?
I certainly do think that's fair, and I feel like in a lot of organizations, you either have all democracy and no centralism whatsoever, or you have
Mm,
all centralism and very little to no democracy. And so it's like if you're going all democracy and no centralism, you have uh, fundamentally, it's like a ship with no sails. You can't really go in any direction. Or it's
yeah,
rather a ship without a rudder. You can't steer it in the direction that you want. And so you're just going wherever the wind blows. And so this often adopts a sort of, um, a movementist sort of project or a movementist trajectory because
yeah,
you are so immersed in the sort of the petty bickering of organizational democracy that you can't really develop a clear or coherent line. And the line is being pulled in a multitude of different directions, and there really is no way to come together and say, okay, this is the measures we should adopt, this is the direction we should go. There are a lot of organizations within the United States. One that comes to my mind is the DSA, the Democratic Socialist of America, where this seems to be the trend. There are a lot of, and I'm not dissing the DSA. I'm not saying that there are no good people within DSA. And in fact, I'm saying the opposite. There are a lot of chapters for DSA which are trying to steer that organization down a more revolutionary trajectory. But unfortunately, the multitude of struggling tendencies within that particular organization means that there is no coming together and forming some kind of a centralized line. And unfortunately, if a line is formed, it's usually something electoral, something reformist. But
yeah,
on the inverse, you also have a lot of organizations that go in the opposite direction. And I seem to think that this is a knee jerk reaction, sort of a overcorrection, where these organizations go all centralism and no democracy. And so you have this sort of commandist formation come about through a ruling clique that just sort of dictates everything to the rank and file. And I would say in terms of centralism versus democracy, it's not a 50-50 split. But I think that centralism should take primacy over democracy, just in terms of getting stuff done. But to do all centralism with absolutely no inter-party democracy or inter-organizational democracy is a fundamental error. And unfortunately, I see that error being committed within a multitude of Marxist-Leninist organizations. And I've been involved in two, and I don't really want to name names, but one party formation I was involved in definitely committed this error, and the other one had a much better balance. And so I've seen both sides of the coin. I've seen an organization that applied democratic centralism in a very effective way, and I've seen an organization who abused democratic centralism and used it as a bludgeon to silence any sort of opposition and just sort of enshrine this commandist bureaucracy within the party. And to that end, when you are using democratic centralism to say, there is no line struggle within the party, you just have to accept whatever leadership says, and if you don't, and if you dare try to criticize leadership or steer the party in a more revolutionary direction, you are being a wrecker, you're being a factionalist, you're being a petty bourgeois individualist. This
yeah,
is right. It's like this is the sort of trend that you see with a lot of commandist formations, and I don't want to paint all of Marxism-Leninism with this broad brush, because I've seen Marxist-Leninist formations who do this correctly. I've also seen them do it incorrectly, and this is also a tendency you see within Trotskyite formations. I feel like a lot of tendencies do this. They either go completely into the ultra-democracy realm, or they go completely into the ultra-centralism realm. And there has to be some give and take. There has to be a balance.
Yeah, definitely. I generally see it as more of a dialectical process where at a certain period it's principally democracy. At a certain period, when you're having that open discussion and you're having that unity of thoughts, this diversity of thoughts, um, within the organization, you're discussing a matter before it becomes centralized, before you then move to the centralization process where you actually make it part of the organizational line. And at that point, after the matter's been closed, then that's the line that you would uphold, outside of the party, externally, whatever point it might be. So it's dialectical. Sometimes it's principally democracy, and at some point it's principally centralism. It just depends on what point within the process of democratic centralism you're looking at. And unfortunately, some organizations, as you said, they just go ultra-centralism or they go ultra-democracy. And again, you're just not understanding. People are just not understanding how this shifts over time with the process. And as you said, it's often a case of this being a result of overcorrections. You go to one organization and you're having like a democratic vote on, what pizza toppings you're gonna order. And it's just like unwieldy. You've got like 300 people in a room trying to discuss over the minutiae of organizing. When really at that point, you don't need for those kind of low level things. You don't need to have this democratic process on that. People just decide and just do it and get on with it, but at the same time, for bigger issues, for important issues, for line issues in particular, you do need to have that democratic open discussion, and also the opportunity to correct incorrect lines that are already there. So if somebody identifies that there's an incorrect line within an organization, that needs to be open for discussion and to be open for correction. Like if an organization, for example, wants to move from Marxism-Leninism to Marxism-Leninism Maoism, there needs to be space for that debate and discussion to occur, for that struggle to occur, the line struggle to happen. Unfortunately, those line struggles are often stamped out in Marxist-Leninist organizations when people try to initiate them, and people are isolated or, again, just written off as individualists or something like that, or factionalists, or there's a million different ways that they can silence dissent, but they're not doing the job right then. They're not doing democratic centralism correctly, if that's the issue. But at the same time, if you don't have democratic centralism, if you don't have this, then you just fall into ultra democracy and you don't get anywhere. You can't get anything done. Like, you literally can't go out and do a protest or do some sort of action or activity. It's just impossible to get it done because you're paralyzed by the democratic process on every single issue all the time. Do you know what I mean?
Right. It's definitely a balancing act, and it is. I've seen both sides. I've seen ultra democracy. I've seen ultra centralism, and there needs to be a balance. You need to have that sort of diversity of discussion, but a unity in action and a unity in line going forward. And I feel like it's very, very easy for people to default to these labels of like, oh, you're an ultra, you're a factionalist, you're a splitter, and there is a difference. These words have meaning, and to be a factionalist or to be a splitter has a very specific meaning, a very specific connotation. There are very specific actions to be associated with that. But simply trying to encourage the democratic process within a commandist sort of formation is not factionalism. Trying to encourage a party, for example, one that is entrenched within revisionist Marxism-Leninism, to pursue the Maoist line is not being a factionalist. And often, I should probably pull up my bingo card again. I'm not going to do it, but you can go back to my bingo card and they'll use those insults like, oh, you're an ultra, you're a larper, you're a splitter, you're a factionalist. Some will even accuse Maoists of being Trotskyist because we insist on upholding the revolutionary trajectory. and they will
Mm.
say, well, how dare you, sir? You think that you know better than the party leadership? You think that you know better than the experience of William Z. Foster, or what have you? And so uh, they will use all of these excuses to maintain a revisionist line and to skirt around the democratic process. And they will use and abuse these terms like ultra leftist or factionalist to silence opposition. And again, I'm not trying to say that like ultra leftism and factionalism are not issues within party organizing. They certainly are. But you have to
Yeah,
be able to differentiate them from a principled line struggle.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. Because these words become meaningless if you're just applying them to everyone and anyone. Then when someone comes to you with some actual factionalism and some actual ultra leftism, they're like, "Oh, grab your guns, we're gonna go do FOCO right now." We're just FOCO theory. Why not? Yeah, yeah. Shay thought it was cool, so let's do it straight away. That actually is ultra leftism. That's way beyond where the masses are and want to be right now, and that would be genuine ultra leftism. So you
Right.
need to be able to challenge those when they come up. And if you're just creating this boogeyman, if you're just crying wolf all the time at anyone who challenges revisionism, then well, people aren't going to believe you. People aren't going to believe you when the wolf actually shows up.
Exactly. And oftentimes it becomes a struggle simply to get um, certain formations and certain tendencies to admit that revisionism exists. And oftentimes, not to pick on Marxist-Leninists, but this is just what I know. Within the Marxist-Leninist movement, they will talk about the revisionism of Edward Bernstein. They'll talk about the revisionism of Karl Kautsky or Nikolai Bukharin. But the second that you start to mention Khrushchev or Deng Xiaoping, then they become very defensive. Some
Yeah.
admittedly will defend Khrushchev or will denounce Khrushchev, but there does seem to be a very widespread tendency of defending Deng Xiaoping. Now, I think this descends into sort of the campist issue that we've both talked about, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's ironic that they will uphold a line struggle against revisionism when it's something placed within distant history, but when it's something contemporary and relevant to the modern movement, all of a sudden they descend into this sort of revisionist knee-jerk reaction to defend these counter-revolutionary retrograde lines. And I feel like in doing so they adopt sort of the same revisionist thinking that was plaguing the Second International in the time of Lenin.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's one of the really important things that people like Joma write about. Modern revisionism, not just the revisionism of Bernstein and Kautsky and stuff, but modern revisionism and how it manifests today. Because there are so many people today who are just literally repeating the same mistakes of the past, particularly with regard to campism and the Second International, and literally just cheerleading for bourgeoisies of different countries, for imperialist bourgeoisies of different countries in some cases, like with Russia and stuff.
Right.
It's just a farce at this stage. History repeating itself, I suppose. Well, not repeating itself, but certainly rhyming with the past. But this it goes to show how you have to learn. You have to learn from the past, and you have to move forward with that. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. And so that sort of leads into the next question, which is, what does Marxism in Ireland look like? And do you see similarities between how Marxism manifests in the Irish context to the American context?
It's a very interesting one because when we talk about Marxism, we're generally talking about organizations that are like they're openly calling themselves communist. We've had a couple of communist parties in Ireland, Communist Party of Ireland, and we also had historically the Communist Party of Ireland, Marxist-Leninist, which was an anti-revisionist organization. Sort of followed the Hojist line, the Mao Zedong Tao line, and then the Hojist line, but that doesn't exist anymore. I would say that honestly, the communist organizations, and I don't mean to be like sniping at them because there's great people in there, there's great activists, and I have a lot of respect for them, a lot of time for them, and they do great work in many ways. But it is in many ways quite detached from the masses. It's quite detached from what, you know, normal working class people would be interested in. If you go up to a normal working class person, like where I live, and you said communism, they'd be like, wait, why are you talking about this thing from, you know, China and Russia in the 20th century? There's no sense of it being like something of Ireland. However, if you said to someone, what do you think of republicanism? They'd be like, yeah, definitely. That's it. I love that. What do you think of socialist republicanism? Yeah, love it. Absolutely brilliant. They adore this. And what is socialist republicanism? Well, that's the synthesis by James Connelly of the revolutionary republican movement, which was the anti-colonial movement that began in the late 1700s by Wolfe and the United Irishmen. So that's the anti-colonial struggle, combined with scientific socialism, which is Marxism, historical materialism. And this is really founded by James Connolly's Irish Socialist Republican Party in the late 1800s. It's not always fully as consciously thought out as that. People who might call themselves socialist republicans might not be quite consciously aware that that's the lineage that they're taking on. But the socialist republican movement will be much stronger than the consciously or openly communist movement, if you can wrap your head around that or make sense about that. And people that like socialists, Marxists, communists wouldn't really have an issue with that. We wouldn't see a problem with that, because the way we see it is that colonialism in the 6 counties and semi-colonialism in the 26 counties are the primary tasks to be dealt with in Ireland today. You know, people really have a strong anti-imperialist sentiment in this country. Out of everywhere in Europe, Ireland has the highest level of support for like Palestine, and that's because we have this anti-imperialist consciousness. It's quite crude. It's not fully developed. There's not really necessarily a full concrete understanding of what like economic imperialism is, but there's a general sense of support for the underdog. There is a general sense of support for socialism and for national liberation. But Irish people generally have a little bit of an aversion to the words themselves. I don't know if it's like this in the USA, but people absolutely love when you talk about socialism up until you say the words, unless you're saying socialist republicanism when you're talking about James Connolly. Like for example, if you look at the 1916 proclamation that we had, you know, the 1916 Rising, they had the proclamation, and you look at the republic that they declared, and you look at the first program of Ireland, of the new revolutionary Irish Republic, that everybody voted for across the entire 32 counties of Ireland. They voted for a free and independent Irish Republic, which was very much socialist oriented. So if you open up the democratic programme of the first Irish Republic, of the first Dáil Éireann, the first parliament in Ireland, you're going to see a commitment to the international working class struggle. What's that? That's the socialist struggle. They don't call it the socialist struggle. They just say the international workers' struggle. You know what I mean? You see, like in that same document, you see that all private property will be subordinate to the public, to the public need, to the public will, you know, to the public requirements. So again, very socialistic, but not quite using the same words. They talk about how they don't say the means of production need to be held in common by the people, but they say all of the wealth and wealth producing processes in the country needs to be held collectively in common by the people. And so, like with these slight changes of words, it's not using the Marxist terminology, but it's pointing at the very same thing. And I think that one of the big reasons for this is that in Ireland, we're not that far off from primitive communism. You know, a lot of people don't quite get this, but in the 1600s in Gaelic Ireland, we still had the communal relations of production up until 1649, up until Cromwell came in and wiped out the last remnants of communal society. You know, it was all communal land ownership. People will often rewrite history and say that the chiefs of the tribes who were there, like they call them kings. You know, they call them kings and high kings and this and that and the other, but they were actually chiefs. That's actually a mistranslation based on English, like the English language. But actually, they were just chiefs of tribes. And so communal, like land was held communally, collectively. And you can actually see Engels and Marx just like glowing about this in little letters to each other. They're just like, oh my God, did you realize that the communal mode of production was still in full force in Ireland in the 1600s? Is that so crazy? Check it out, Marx, check it out. It's really funny. Actually, I posted a picture of this on Twitter of Engels just glowing over this. But yeah, I mean, it's there, you know. So like communism itself is actually it's very much here. It's in Ireland. It's always been there. In every struggle for Irish national liberation, it's been about getting back to that. It's been about restoring Gaelic Ireland. It's about taking apart the class society that England imposed upon Ireland. They imposed feudalism and then capitalism upon Ireland. Ireland didn't independently, natively develop through these stages. There never was like a slave state. In Gaelic Ireland, there wasn't a feudal state. There wasn't a capitalist state. We didn't have those. We didn't have the state. You know what I mean? So that just wasn't a thing. We did have laws. We did have, but it was an honor-based system that existed in Gaelic Ireland, the communal honor-based system, rather than something that was enforced down the barrel of a gun, or down the blade of a sword or something like that.
Right.
So it was very.
Oh, go on.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I just. So that's what people really resonate with. People really resonate with that history, and the sort of communal society, and everybody wants to go back to that. And it's like, how do we get there? How do we get there? And the way that has generally manifested is through the Republican movement. And Marx himself he was always saying that the Fenian movement, the Republican movement, it's the same thing. We use the two words synonymously. That's always been rooted among the working, the lower classes, the peasants and the workers. That's always been rooted among them. It's always been a workers' movement. Lenin later on came out and said that it was petty bourgeois around the time of the Rising, but that was probably because he could see in contrast that there was the Irish Citizen Army, which was led by James Connelly, and that was consciously Marxist and consciously proletarian. So there was a little bit more of a contrast there. But there was a united front there between the workers, the working class movement, and the petty bourgeois led movement. So there was a connection there, and that was part of a national liberation united front that unfortunately was put down very violently by the Brits and their comprador lackeys that exist here. So people are very sympathetic towards all of these ideas, but they often have to be framed in a different way, just because of the particular context that Ireland is in. We often say as MLMs that the principal contradiction internationally is imperialism. That's the case in Ireland, even at the national scale. The issue is dealing with colonialism in the occupied 6 counties in the northeast of Ireland, and semi-colonialism in the southern 26 counties. And a lot of people are very conscious of those things. They're very conscious of colonialism. They're maybe not quite as conscious of semi-colonialism and neocolonialism. They maybe haven't quite grasped that, but most people have some kind of inkling about it. It's just not consciously brought forward. And so people do want to solve these problems. They see the problems. They recognize that they want to move beyond them. They want to deal with this principal contradiction it's experienced. And unfortunately, this is generally manifesting. The way people are feeling that they can deal with this is through reformist means. It's through Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin has been seen as this rising force. Of course, Sinn Féin was a revolutionary, like a hardcore revolutionary organization, or at least associated with, the Provisional IRA and Provisional Sinn Féin. They were part of that movement, and they were a genuine revolutionary socialist Republican organization. Between the 70s, between the late 60s and the mid 90s, they started to move more and more towards the right from the 80s onwards. But they were a genuinely revolutionary force back then, and a lot of people support Sinn Féin now, thinking that that's still what they are, when actually today they're more like a social democratic reformist group. And I'd also say that it's a bitter pill for a lot of people to swallow now, seeing the leader of Sinn Féin at the moment, like welcoming Joe Biden from the US, who's come over, like they're doing like air kisses with each other and shit, and it just looks so. People are just like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what is this? This isn't. We thought you were like a genuine anti-imperialist group, and they were at one point. They were genuinely fighting for a 32 county socialist republic, and thousands of people gave their lives for that. Throughout the struggle, throughout the conflict, but. Unfortunately, they've moved to more of a centre-left position. That being said, it is positive that so many people resonate with what they believe to be a socialist Republican trajectory. It's positive and progressive that people are seeing this, and people are moving in that direction, and they have that consciousness. But it's going to be the task of genuine socialist Republicans to highlight the shortcomings of Sinn Féin as they come into power in the next election. Don't forget, in the last election that we had in 2020, they were the most popular party in the 26 counties. They're in power in the 6 counties already, but they were the most popular party here in the 26 counties, and so they're kind of seen as like the genuine democratic will of the people, but they're not actually in government yet. Other parties basically got together and said, we don't want these guys in, so let's just keep them out. By the right wing basically just got together and got enough seats to oust them. But they won't be able to do that next time because their popularity has plummeted as the housing crisis has just gone insane, gone to really incredible levels recently. And Sinn Féin have just continued to this meteoric rise to power, and they're all but guaranteed to win in the next election. And it might be even a case that that they'll be like the majority party at this stage. At this stage, it looks like that's the trajectory that they're on. But yeah, so yeah, it's encouraging on one hand to see that people are resonating with this trajectory, with what they believe to be socialist republicanism, and even if the leadership actually is going in more of a reformist direction, but it's not obviously going to deliver the national liberation and socialism that people want. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of a true. I don't know if I've really answered your question properly, because you've asked, of course, about like what Marxism is like in Ireland, but it is in Ireland. The principal contradiction is national oppression. It is imperialism, and that's where the primary focus needs to be. It is about socialist republicanism rather than like groups that would consciously call themselves communists. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I feel like you did a really great job breaking down the entire context of the movement in Ireland. And I have seen some key differences between that and how Marxism manifests in the United States. Of course, Ireland having that history of the primitive communism and of the commune system really does a great job in cementing a sort of working class consciousness within the Irish population that unfortunately you don't really see within the American population. The American working class is very much retrograde, very much reactionary, and capitalism has sort of just become entrenched and enshrined within the American national consciousness for so long that people can't really envision a society without private property or without private ownership over the means of production. And these things have become just as American as apple pie. And of course, there have been movements within American history to sort of form a more collective class consciousness. But unfortunately, petty bourgeois individualism reigns supreme. And I think a lot of that traces back to one of the other key differences, which is that within Irish society, there is a direct experience of colonialism in the occupied counties and semi-colonialism in the rest of the country. And so, it's like you said, when you were a child, you saw the British guns being pointed at you, and you can't deny that. But within the American context, we are the ones who are inflicting the imperialism upon the rest of the world, and so we don't see it. And when we're young, and within our educational upbringing and in the media, you see the American military as a a peacekeeping force in the world, and we're there to bring freedom and democracy and all that rhetoric. And so people don't see the other side of that. They don't see the guns being pointed at the imperialized world. They see us as a stabilizing force. And so unfortunately, there is just so much imperialist propaganda that is shoved down our throats on a daily basis. And that combined with this sort of petty bourgeois individualism and merged with the overall settler colonialist structure of the United States means that the fight to even build a proletarian internationalist class consciousness is a very uphill battle, and you have to undo so much programming. There's so much propaganda out there that you just have to counter. And unfortunately, within this country, Marxists struggle with countering settler colonial propaganda. They struggle with countering even imperialist propaganda. And usually, as we've seen, as we've discussed, the anti-imperialist movement, especially within this country, often just assumes a sort of campism. And so, unfortunately, I wish that the American population were as class conscious as the Irish population, but we're just not there yet. And I think one of the primary contradictions within American society is, of course, addressing settler colonialism from a
Yeah,
proletarian point of view, from a revolutionary point of view. And
yeah.
unfortunately, this issue just becomes ignored because they view it as ultra leftist, or they view it as, even liberal to a certain extent.
Yeah, that's actually they're really, really good points. I can't help but think of how relevant the Black Panther Party is because they seem to have been like the strongest force, the strongest left-wing socialist national liberationist force, in at least in sort of the post, the second half of the 20th century. They were like the strongest force, one of the greatest movements to come out of the U.S. territory, and that's again based in this national liberation, Black Power sort of movement. And that is again dealing with the national question, and I think that's quite interesting. And the Black Panther Party and associated organizations were really they were really blazing the trails. They were the trailblazers, and I wonder if that's where the real strength will lie in the future of the movement within the territory of the U.S. Potentially led by the colonized and oppressed nations that exist within the territories.
Yeah, that is honestly where I'm hoping the trajectory of the movement in this country goes towards. It goes away from this sort of reactionary tailism of the settler working class and towards the forces of our society which can actually advance the decolonial struggle. And of course, unfortunately, a huge sector of the working class consists of this sort of white settler populace, and so it becomes a battle to deprogram them from the sort of settler chauvinism that they've been inundated with from the very, very beginning. And so,
Yeah,
therefore, I feel like Marxism becomes something much more palatable to the um, indigenous population and to occupied nations, and certainly to displaced African Americans. And so this, they are much more receptive to the socialist revolution. And the Marxist movement in this country has struggled to deal with those issues. Of course, you had the sort of uh, reactionary settler nationalism of Earl Browder, and that dominated the line of the CPUSA for a great many years. And sort of relating this back to what you said about the Sinn Féin, there was a time in American history where the CPUSA was a genuine positive force in advancing the revolutionary cause in this country, but unfortunately they have become diluted and they have become sort of a liberal appendage formation. But and you see this trend within a lot of imperialized countries where there is a broad sort of left populist party that comes into power and that emerges, and the right consolidates and forms a coalition to thwart them. And so it's
yeah,
unfortunate, but when a revolutionary or just overall progressive conditions start to arise, the right will consolidate and form a coalition. And it's a shame that we can't see that same kind of cohesive action take place on the left, which often remains very divided. And I think that's becomes the importance in constructing a sort of united front along a revolutionary trajectory.
definitely, yeah. And understanding the different levels of unity that exists within that, like you don't need to agree with everyone on every single thing. If you're in a party together, then yes, you will need to struggle and try to achieve, like the really high level Marxist unity. But if you're just in a united front with someone and you're uniting to achieve specific goals and specific tasks, then you don't necessarily need that same level of unity that you would have with them. Obviously, I would never advocate uniting with reactionaries or anything like that. But there are going to be places and times when you will need to ally yourselves on certain campaigns or whatever it might be with, Demsocs and anarchists and, all sorts of people who, maybe wouldn't share like the same long-term vision that we might have. Do you know what I mean? But
Right.
understanding those different levels of unity that exist.
Right, I definitely agree. And, this sort of forms the groundwork for moving into the next question, which is, and you've already sort of touched on this, but how does neocolonialism impact Ireland today?
Yeah, so yeah, I was talking a little bit before about how colonialism is pretty well understood. Pretty much everybody understands that the six counties are occupied. It's very clear. You still see British military forces on the ground, in the skies, everywhere. But people do often struggle to recognise neo-colonialism and semi-colonialism in the 26 counties. The United States, just to talk with regard to semi-colonialism, people sometimes ask, who is the primary force in terms of the imperialist powers? Ireland, particularly the 26 counties, is very much in a tug of war at the moment between the United States and Britain for this hegemony over the country. And so you do see this push and pull between the two, which is interesting to see. And I think if you were to be extremely charitable to like Sinn Féin, being cozying up to the US, they're like playing one imperialist power off another to try and use that as like a stepping stone to get to the next stage, which would be, a united Ireland and then a reunited Ireland, I should say. If you wanted to be very generous, you could make that argument, but I'm not sure how generous I'm feeling today. Seeing those pictures doesn't have me in a very generous mood. But anyway. So, regards to this semi-colonial base that exists in the 26 counties, I should say the six counties obviously are economically, politically, in every way just dominated by Britain. But in the 26 counties, the semi-colonial economic base that exists here, capitalism here in the 26 county state is completely dependent on US multinational corporations. If you go to top1000.ie and you look at the top companies in Ireland in terms of income, in terms of revenue and annual turnover, 8 out of the top 10 largest companies in Ireland are American tech and pharmaceutical companies. And so you can see that there's this massive economic dependence upon US capitalism within Ireland. And this really leads to a lot of problems. People often look at me strange when I say that Ireland basically requires something akin to like an NEP before socialism is actually going to be possible. Because the second you have proletarian revolution in this country, what you're going to find is that uh, like 80% of the industry that exists here is going to pull out immediately, because you're talking about Apple, you're talking about Google, you're talking about all of the big tech and big pharmaceutical companies that are caught up in these complex global supply chains that are going to evaporate overnight, And so, like, if you go and try and seize Apple, you try to nationalize Apple. Well, fuck, you just nationalized an empty building. Great, because you lose access. You lose access to all of the supply chains that make it possible for production to occur at that level. And it causes all kinds of problems, because we don't have, and we never have, in this supposedly independent state, this semi-colonial state, we've never industrialized ourselves. We've always had this, our path to industrialization that our leaders have pursued was simply to seek foreign direct investment from abroad. So basically to get other people to industrialize us. And this worked out pretty well for the government and for construction, because we could get a few construction jobs, because we could just build buildings for other companies to come in and do their thing in. Unfortunately, Ireland also decided to make itself a tax haven. So even these big companies that are coming over, that money isn't going to that money that's coming into the country that makes our GDP look so incredible, makes us look like one of the richest countries in not only in Europe but in the world. That money's not going to normal people, because we have tax avoidance mechanisms like the double Irish agreements. Double Irish with the Dutch sandwich. Sometimes they combine it with tax avoidance mechanisms in the Netherlands as well, and they just don't pay any tax. They pay no tax. They register as a business in Ireland, and then they send their money elsewhere, and they don't need to pay corporation tax on that. And that gives them not only a place where they don't need to pay corporation tax, But because Ireland's in the European Union, it gives them access to the European Union central, what's it called, common market. And this that's basically it. That's basically the Irish economy now. It's a stack of cards. It's just waiting to collapse and crumble down on itself. And
Yeah,
so this presents serious problems for people who want to build socialism, because the second you try and do that, you're going to set the country back about a century, about 100 years. You need to develop this industry, which is why I've often controversially said that Ireland actually really does need to develop its own state capitalism and cooperative capitalism before you can have a genuine transformation to socialist relations of production. So, like in a revolutionary situation, you're probably looking at about like a 5 to 7 year period post-proletarian revolution before you can genuinely put in place proper socialist relations of production. Obviously, I'm not talking about private capitalism. I'm talking about state capitalism.
right.
But yeah, we do need to do that, because in terms of our own industry and in terms of our own self-sufficiency, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. We've got very little in terms of what we could survive and sustain ourselves on. We have a little bit of beef that we export to England and a little bit of butter. I don't think people are going to survive on beef and butter, especially with the kind of lifestyles that people are used to now by living in the kind of country that we do, that's connected to Europe and has access to all these consumer goods. There's going to be a lot of challenges there. Things are going to be very, very difficult. But what this ultimately points to is this state of incredible economic dependency and the need to build up self-sufficiency. So that's what we talk about when we're talking about semi-colonialism. It's this. This is what we're talking about: economic dependency upon U.S. capitalism, primarily. In the 26 counties, that is.
Right. It
When we talk,
seems. Oh, go
yeah, go
ahead.
ahead. No, sorry. No. You
Oh,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it seems like this is a problem seen throughout the imperialized world, where you have these bureaucrat-comprador structures being created, and it serves to create a dependence on the imperialist metropoles, and
Exactly.
therefore the whole prospect of a proletarian revolution becomes something that is scary and daunting to a lot of people. And so I feel like that is why Maoists have developed the concept of new democracy. So the new democratic period is something that becomes a necessity, especially within countries undergoing comprador bureaucrat capitalism. And oftentimes people see you arguing for state capitalism, and they say, aha, you're a revisionist, you're basically arguing for Deng Xiaoping thought. and, and no, we are certainly not advocating for a capitalist period to dismantle any existing socialist project and implement a decades long state capitalist period in which uh,
No, that.
private ownership over the means of production and capitalist social relations do reign supreme. And so when Maoists talk about a new democratic period, this is within the context of a revolutionary trajectory.
Yeah, and it's what it is it's still a dictatorship of proletariat, which I think is really important. The proletariat is still in charge and in control. That has to be the case. The proletariat has to be the ruling class, which is really important, because like when it comes to like Denghism and stuff like that, you have capitalists in the ruling party, and that's you have people like Jack Ma and stuff like that in the CPC's party, and you're talking about literal financial oligarchs in your ruling party. That's not a proletarian party when you have financial oligarchs in it. Do you know what I mean? So you can't have that sort of situation, and it is of course transitory. You're moving towards socialism, you're moving towards communism rather than moving away from it, which I think is very important.
That's a
With
very
regard,
Oh, I was just going to
oh
say
sorry,
that's a key point that a lot of people need to emphasize when we're talking about new democracy. We're talking about the overall trajectory. We are advancing
yeah,
forward into socialism. We are not retreating backwards into capitalist restoration.
yeah, exactly, yeah. Um, and also just draws a distinction as well with regard to semi-colonialism and neo-colonialism. CPI Maoists do a pretty good job of explaining this, but generally when we're talking about semi-colonialism, we're talking about the economic base. So we're talking about the mode of production, the relations of production, productive forces, and so on. And then when we talk about neocolonialism, we're generally talking about the superstructure, the government, the culture, the media, the arts, everything else, so all of the other aspects of society that aren't directly a part of the process of production. We definitely have a serious neocolonial superstructure that exists here as well. The Irish state itself is under very tight control by the British, and more so by the US as well, but particularly by the British at the moment. For example, if you look at the Irish police force on Garda Síochána, the head of that police force is a guy called Drew Harris. He was the former chief constable, again, the head of the colonial RUC or PSNI in the six counties. So basically, he was the head of police in the six counties, the colonial police force that exists there. And while he was in that, and as part of other groups as well, he swore a lifelong oath of loyalty to the British monarchy. So the head of our police force has a lifelong oath of loyalty to the British monarchy. That's in direct contradiction with the interests of an independent Ireland. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's also quite interesting as well, like when you look into his history. I believe his father was killed by the Irish Republican Army back in I think it was in the 70s or the 80s, and so he has a bone to pick with Irish republicanism, and so it's interesting. It's interesting to see him in a position at the top of the armed forces of the Irish Free State, the 26 county statelets.
Sounds
and
like
this is all throughout government.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it sounds like a classic supervillain origin story.
Something like that, yeah. But you see this all the time. Like every other week, it's pointed out that some or other senior Irish government official is ousted as like a British military intelligence agent. Literally, just Google, senior Irish government official, British military intelligence agents, and you're just gonna find a bunch of them. They're all throughout. The state is just littered with them. So that's like within the state, within the repressive apparatuses of the state, you have literal British colonial plants, which are still there in this supposedly independent country, which is interesting. Of course, Britain controls Ireland's Air Force, which is again that's anti-constitutional, that goes against the Irish Constitution. British feudal law is protected within the Irish legal system. That means that Irish people are still paying feudal ground rents to British absentee feudal landlords.
Oh my god.
And yeah, it's pretty fucked up. This is both private citizens, private citizens. If you buy a house, if you're lucky enough to be in a position where you can actually like buy a house or something like that, there's a good chance that you're going to actually have a ground rent to pay on top of your mortgage. You get your mortgage, you're exploited in the usual capitalist ways, yada yada yada. But then you're going to also be charged a feudal ground rent on top of that. Now, most people don't. It's mostly nominal. But the fact that the Irish state protects this British feudal law is, I think, in itself quite telling. So this happens to private individuals, and it also happens to the state itself. Like the Irish government, the Irish state actually is paying thousands and thousands and thousands of euro every year to these feudal absentee landlords from Britain. And if you go into the OPW, you can find there's like a bunch of buildings that the ground rent is still being paid on, including the government buildings themselves, including Dublin Castle, which is hilarious. That's where people think of when they think of Irish independence. We hoisted the Irish flag and proclaimed our independence to everyone. And of course, the land that's on is still owned by the Brits, the British landlords, as predicted by James Connelly so long ago. So. And of course, then there's obviously the conversation about cultural imperialism. The fact that most people in Ireland can't speak fluid Irish, they can't fluently speak the Irish language, and there just hasn't really been an Irish cultural revival to the extent that there would need to be in a genuinely nationally liberated country. We're just inundated with British media all the time, British music, British culture, British everything. That's moving more and more towards American culture now. Where people in Ireland used to speak with like English accents, now a lot of us speak with American accents. It's interesting because that reflects the economic base. Historically, the economic base within the 26 counties was very much dominated by British companies, British enterprises. And now it's dominated by American enterprises, by US enterprises. And as a result of that, flowing up from that, you have a lot of people speaking with American accents. So, you see this dialectical relationship between the base and the superstructure really playing out here in Ireland today. So it's very interesting. But But yeah, like it's clear as day once it's pointed out to people. They go, "Oh, that's why we're all speaking with American accents now." Oh, interesting, interesting. Eight out of 10 of their top businesses are actually American. Irish capitalism is not Irish capitalism. It's like Scooby Doo. You pull the hood off, and it's actually just American capitalism. And I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you damn socialist Republicans.
Wow, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's all very interesting, and it's also interesting
weird, isn't it?
how Irish culture sort of takes root here in Tennessee, where I live, because a lot of the
Oh,
initial
cool.
white settlers of Tennessee can trace their heritage back to the Scots Irish, and so
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
you get bluegrass music here in Tennessee, and that is traced directly from Irish music, Scots Irish music. And so,
Oh, that's interesting.
and of course, you go to Boston,
Didn't know that.
and it is just inundated with Irish culture. And so, it is interesting how Irish culture has really been infused with American culture, and for a while, especially within the early days of Irish immigration, Irish people were treated very, very poorly within American society, and now they are welcomed as part of our culture. And St. Patrick's Day is just as American as any other holiday, and I like it. I love it. I love St. Patrick's Day, and I love Irish music, and so I definitely welcome that and support that. But it is interesting to see how Irish what's it called, like Irish immigration has affected American culture and has affected specifically Tennessee culture.
Yeah, that is really interesting, actually. But one of the things that I would say, and if there's any Irish American people like listening in here at the moment, there's a task for Irish Americans there to, how can I say this? There's a good book, how the Irish became white, and it gets into the process of how the Irish people were escaping famine and escaping the penal laws in the 1700s and 1800s, and then they went over to the US. And they were treated like shit the same way they're treated in England. And of course, there's the signs up everywhere. No Irish need apply, or no blacks, no Jews, no dogs, no Irish, all this sorts of stuff everywhere. And but at the same time, Irish people in the United States assimilated to settler colonial culture. They learned the rules of whiteness. They learned how to pretend to be, the colonizers. Do you know what I mean? So
Right.
there's an undoing of that which needs to occur. Some people might like phrase that as breaking from whiteness. I don't, however you want to phrase it, whatever. But there needs to be like a breaking from settler colonialism and understanding and standing on the side of the oppressed. And not using, because I've seen a lot of very reactionary tendencies emerge among Irish Americans. Obviously there's like the Irish slavery thing. You hear them saying, like they say
Right.
to like black people in the US, they'll be like, "Oh well, we were slaves too, so therefore shut the fuck up about your whatever." They'll go on about critical race theory or some bullshit like that. When like the reality is that no, we weren't fucking chattel slaves. Don't give me that shit. We were indentured servants. Big fucking difference. 7 years of indentured servitude, and then you get nice little plot of land, and you get to have a pretty decent life after that. That's very different from intergenerational chattel slavery, which is inherited by your kids. It's a totally different dynamic. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, but anyway, but this shared sense of oppression, like the experience of oppression, shouldn't be used to tell other people anyway to shut the fuck up. It should be used as a point of solidarity. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the way. Like there is actually oppression there. There was oppression which caused people to have to leave this country, to leave Ireland and go elsewhere, and that needs to be remembered when people are getting like racist and chauvinistic and all that. Like it's not too long ago that we were on the receiving end of a lot of that bad stuff. That always has to be remembered, and that has to be a point for raising solidarity. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Um, but yeah, that is sort of a dynamic that you encounter, especially within the American South. That sort of
Mm,
equivalency between Irish indentured servitude and the enslavement of the black population. And
yeah,
but yeah, I mean within discussing all of these concepts, it can often be discouraging. It can often be default
Oh, yeah.
into a sense of pessimism. And so that sort of leads into the next question, which is like, how do you maintain revolutionary optimism in such hard times?
You know, I'm always incredibly inspired by the comrades in the Philippines. They just have such good ways of conceptualizing these issues, you know, understanding the internal and external factors which give rise to pessimism, you know, petty bourgeois ideas and ideology, or triggers that might set you off, whatever it might be. They have a very scientific approach to dealing with these matters. And also, you can just like listen to Joma, listen to Joma's speeches, and here's this guy who was fucking, tortured in prison for like 9 years, and he's still out here doing education and supporting people. I mean, he was until recently, rest his soul. Uh, but he's just so, his smile, his spirit, his positivity, his optimism, it still lives on. Kajoma lives, as we say, and it's really inspiring seeing that. It's really inspiring seeing that. But you do need to get your own mental health in order. I think it's very important that people are aware of the importance of making sure everything's okay in your head, and that'll really help your activism. Make sure that you're out there doing your exercise every day. You're showering, you're brushing your teeth regularly, you're just doing things to make yourself feel good. And that's going to make your activism a lot easier. It's going to mean that you're not going to be burning out so quickly, and it's just gonna really really help. Just once you get those basics down. I don't want to sound like Jordan Peterson. Like clean your room before you clean your room. I'm not gonna Kermit the Frog is, but you do need to definitely work on your own mental health to make sure everything's going okay there. And then beyond that, it's of course just remembering to look towards comrades who are out there struggling every day. And I draw an enormous inspiration from the struggles of those in the Philippines, of those in India, of movements I see around me here in Ireland. There's hugely inspiring stuff going on, with Joe Biden here, just yesterday and the day before. These giant Cuba flags were erected in Belfast and Phoenix Park in Dublin. It was all about ending the embargo, the genocidal embargo that's been put on Cuba by the US, and which Joe Biden is continuing to maintain under the false pretense that Cuba is apparently a state. They're saying, it's alleged by the US that Cuba is a state that harbors terrorists, which is of course not true at all. Bullshit. I mean, of course, for the US to be saying that, yeah, okay, throwing stones in glass houses and all that. Anyway, so I'm really inspired. I'm really, really inspired by people doing things like that. The entire mountain in Belfast, there's this mountain. I think it's called Black Mountain. I think it's what it's called. It's more of a hill than a mountain, but there was just this massive Cuba flag, and right next to it there was this massive Palestine flag. And I just thought, wow, that's incredible that these activists are out there doing it. I think it was the Cuba Support Group Ireland who were involved with that, and a few other activists from various different socialist and Republican groups. And yeah, things like that are just hugely inspiring, and they're happening everywhere. I know it's easy to get burdened, and it's quite cumbersome, and we feel like the left is in a bit of a lull right now, and things are a bit pessimistic. But everywhere there's so much stuff to feel excited about, to feel optimistic about, to feel hopeful about. But you have to open your eyes and look for it and to find it and to see it, and to remember, those are real people who are making those things happen. That those things don't just happen magically. That's people actually getting organized and making those things happen. So when Joe Biden went to Belfast and saw on the mountain this massive Cuba flag and saying, end the embargo, and saying no to NATO, and saying, BDS, boycott, divest, sanction with regard to Palestine, those are real people getting out there doing it, and their optimism is infectious as fuck. So if you're feeling bad, just look to the optimists, look to the revolutionaries, and they'll remind you to how to get out of your head and get into the revolution.
Right.
What about
And
you? What about you? How do you manage it?
yeah, I mean, I haven't made it a secret that in my personal life I'm struggling, and I'm still struggling with my mental health and with just personal life issues, but I do try to maintain that revolutionary optimism. And honestly, just getting on YouTube and making videos like this is a way for me to vent, and it's a form of catharsis, and I feel like it's doing something positive rather than just sitting around and playing video games or just wasting my life, doing something else. I feel like I'm honestly doing my own small, humble contributions to building a sort of revolutionary consciousness. And even if just one person said, you know what, I really like Dankey King's videos, and I really like watching them, and I learned something else, something new today, it makes it all worth it. And so, yeah, just being here on YouTube and learning to go at my own pace, not falling into this sort of defeatist attitude, not succumbing to imposter syndrome, and just putting myself out there and just trying to create content that I think is educational, that I think will lead to a furthering of class consciousness in this country, countering some of the reactionary propaganda that we see inundated on the internet on a daily basis. I feel like while it may seem like you're shoveling snow in a blizzard, it's important to just keep on shoveling, and maybe you'll reach some kind of a breakthrough point and actually do something good. And I think streams like this, small and as humble as they are, do serve a purpose. And of course, it can't replace real life activism, but for a lot of people, especially people who are going through mental health issues right now, it's just not something that is universally applicable. Not everybody can get involved with real life activism and going out there and joining an organization. It's a lot of time and it's a lot of work, and it's people don't understand that. People don't understand the kind of commitment and dedication that it takes to be in an organization. And so a lot of people will sort of gatekeep and say, oh, well, you're not a true communist unless you're in a party and unless you're going to meetings every single day. And I feel like that's sort of an elitist attitude. And look, I'm not saying that like posting on the internet is the ultimate solution or takes the ultimate form of activism. I mean, I know that there are some debate bros out there who pretty much live on the internet, and there does need to be a balance. But I can just speak from my own personal experience. The way that I am right now, the state that my mental health is in right now, just making these videos is something that I can do to help advance the revolutionary project. And that's all I feel comfortable doing right now. And I think it's important to know your limitations and don't push yourself too far. Because if you do try to push yourself before you're ready, you will get burned out. And then you will default into pessimism. Like I did, and you'll go on a hiatus for a year, and that's no fun. That's no fun for anybody. And so, talking about how to maintain revolutionary optimism, I have been inspired by a lot of people on YouTube, the foremost of which, of course, being you, Comrade Paul. I've been watching your videos religiously, and every time a new one comes out, I'm like, oh boy, a new Marxism Today video dropped. Time to watch that and get out the popcorn, and I love it. And so talking about you, I wanted to ask you, who are some of your inspirations, both in real life and on YouTube? I mean, I know you mentioned Joma, and of course he's an inspiration to us all. He should serve as an inspiration to us all, and I think it's important for us to maintain the spirit of Joma, that sort of optimistic spirit. But talking about online or in real life, what are some of your inspirations?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. I also just wanted to touch on something that you mentioned before I dive into the inspirations. You mentioned this about just being online and about, doing your thing, working at your own pace, doing what you're able to do. And if there's one thing that I've learned over the years that people have taught me, people far wiser, smarter, and more knowledgeable than I will probably ever be, have taught me, it's that there's a place for everyone in the movement. Absolutely everyone. Whatever it is that you can do, whatever, as you say, the limitations are for you, there's a space for you, and if that's making online videos, then that's brilliant. Do that, If that's you're out there engaging in revolutionary activism, great, do that. If you're just someone who just shows up to meetings and takes minutes or something like that, brilliant, do that. There's a place for absolutely everyone, and doing what you're doing right now is absolutely brilliant. Keep on doing it. Don't burn yourself out. don't get down on it, and I hope you don't take another like year-long hiatus
Oh
as a
no.
result of this. Take it at your own pace, but never forget that it is important and that you are contributing to something like way bigger than us ourselves individually can even comprehend. You're helping to move the movement in the trajectory that we want to go in towards socialism. So that's all I want to say before moving to the actual question that you wanted to ask. So inspirations in real life and on YouTube. In real life, I suppose the biggest inspirations probably won't come as a surprise to anyone is, James Connelly. James Connelly, amazing, incredible revolutionary, and a working class revolutionary, a working class organic intellectual, as people like Ramsey would call them, working class upbringing, great Marxist, and not just a theorist, but a great revolutionary who gave his life fighting for national and social liberation. So, an incredible inspiration to me, to pretty much everyone in Ireland. Second from that, the next inspiration would probably be Seamus Costello. He's again another we can say an adherent of Connelly. And he did everything. He was just one of these guys who was involved with the Irish Republican Army, with the Irish Republican Socialist Party, and the Irish National Liberation Army. He did everything. He was involved in like the trade unions. He was involved in council elections. He was elected to like a million different public positions in his life. Meanwhile, being a member of like these armed organizations that were engaged in like guerrilla warfare and shit. And he just did fucking everything. He was just a genuine revolutionary, an incredibly inspiring person, and just a great figure. That's Seamus Costello. There's a video on my channel if people don't know who he is and want to learn a little bit more about him. But yeah, he lived in sort of the mid 20th century, and unfortunately he died in the late 70s at the hands of counter-revolutionaries. And this is one of the reasons why it's so important to take a position against revisionism, because the people who killed him were the official movements, the official IRA. They took it started off as like they were like the Marxist-Leninists. They were going down more of like a revisionist, kind of like we talk about like Pat Talks today, going down that very right-wing trajectory. And they took that sort of path, and he went on a more of an anti-revisionist path when he formed the Irish Republican Socialist Party and the INLA. And he was looking towards China, towards like Mao Zedong thought, and he was really interested in what was going on in Vietnam. And so taking more of a revolutionary and anti-revisionist perspective. And of course, he was assassinated by the revisionists, by the counter-revolutionaries, because they didn't want to see this developing, blossoming anti-revisionist movement. And so it really shows just how far revisionism can go. It's I sometimes cringe when I hear people using terms like social fascists to describe like social democrats and stuff. It just seems so unnecessary and like
Right.
really ridiculously antagonistic. But there are certain supposed, self-proclaimed Marxist-Leninists who really do take such a right-wing trajectory that they become full-on reactionaries and full-on fascists who are literally murdering and assassinating genuine revolutionaries. And that's unfortunately what happens to Seamus Costello. So people need to learn from his life, from his teachings, from his practice, and take that forward. Aside from that, Wolfe Tone, of course, is one of my other big inspirations. Wolfe Tone is such an interesting person to me. He's often called the father or grandfather of Irish republicanism, and he's a very interesting person to me because sometimes Irish republicanism is presented as though it's like Catholic ethno-nationalism. You often hear this thing, like the conflict in the six counties that occurred from like the 60s up until the 90s is often presented as like an ethno-nationalist battle between Catholics and Protestants. It was never about theology. Nobody was ever debating different ways of interpreting with Christianity. That was never the case. It was always about the natives and the settler colonizers. It was always about that. Well, this guy actually came from a Protestant background. Actually, he was a French Presbyterian. He came from a French Presbyterian background. And he was a settler colonizer. He came from a middle-class background. And this was the 1700s when the natives of Ireland were subjected to the most extreme penal laws imaginable, to the point where the natives couldn't even get a decent education. So many of them were illiterate. They weren't able to read. They weren't able to write. Silly things. They couldn't own a horse that was worth more than £5. Just things like that, because the Brits thought that they were going to use that as like a military horse to to mount an
Wow.
uprising and rebellion. Just silly shit, you know. But there was just so much oppression of Irish natives at this time, and he didn't side with imperialism. He didn't side with settler colonialism. He decided to side with the natives against imperialism. He turned against Britain. And I think that this is instructive and illustrative for so many people. You know, he gave up a life of privilege, you know, a petty bourgeois background, a landed background, and he gave his life. He ultimately gave his life fighting for national liberation of Ireland. He had a very socialistic consciousness to him, and he was very interested in, you know, what he called the men of no property. But this is the 1700s, of course, before scientific socialism, as we would come to understand it, even existed. But he had a very socialistic consciousness, and he was always siding with the oppressed. He started out in the United Irishmen. They formed in, I think it was 1791, 1792, and they were quite reformists. They realised that that wasn't going to work. Well, about 7 years later, they were leading an armed struggle which had mobilised over 10,000 people to fight and give their lives for Irish freedom, the freedom of the oppressed, you know. And he did that. It wasn't one of these cases where a settler colonizer comes in and makes themselves like the center of the show, and you know the natives just die, and then the settler colonizer goes off and has a really nice, comfortable life as a result, or something like this. Which is what we see with co-optation so often from people like, I think in the US you have the Democrats doing this quite a lot, you know, where they'll co-opt the struggles of the oppressed, or you know, like Black Lives Matter or things like this, and they'll just use that to garner votes or whatever it might be for their own political ends.
Oh yeah,
Well,
definitely.
this guy actually gave his life for fighting for the liberation of the oppressed, you know, and he gave birth to a movement which would then be taken on and taken up by the oppressed, by the workers and the peasants, and carried forward to this day as the revolutionary struggle representative of uh, the dream of a free and independent Ireland, you know, based on the property relations that we had in Gaelic Ireland, which is of course communal land relations and so on. So he's a really interesting figure for me. He's a pre-Marxist figure, but I'm just always incredibly blown away by his background and that spirit of sacrifice for the oppressed. Even as someone who comes from a background where he would have benefited more from just enjoying the colonial privilege. Do you know what I mean? But he gave it up. He gave it up for because he realized just how awful imperialism was. You know, of
Yeah.
course we talked about Cad Joma as well. You know, well, not coming from like the same level of colonial background or anything like that. He also came from a petty bourgeois background. You know, he gave up his he gave his he basically gave up his life and liberty for the freedom of the peasants and the workers in the Philippines. You know, as we said, he spent nearly 9 years being tortured under the fascist Marcos dictatorship, and then he dedicated the rest of his life once he got freed to from exile to building support for the revolution and the movement from abroad. You know, I mean, even up to his dying day, he was doing like these little classes like every Sunday with the National Democratic Online movement. I forget what it's called right now, but he'd be just answering questions. It was like these little Facebook Live things, and he'd be answering questions to people. So can you imagine? Can you imagine? This is a guy who led, like he formed the CPP, the NPA. He's like an OG revolutionary. He was there in the Cultural Revolution in Mao's China. Could you imagine having like, you know, Marx or Engels or Lenin or Stalin or Mao doing like a live stream and just like answering your questions and chatting with you, and just that's what he was doing. He was doing that just with the youth, just with normal people. He wasn't up on a pedestal. He wasn't doing anything fancy. He wasn't making tons of money selling books, or you know, being some sort of careerist opportunist. No, he was just going directly to the masses and answering their questions, engaging with them, educating, helping, all from exile. You know, again, it's just this enormous spirit of self-sacrifice for the masses, and it's incredible, amazing, just a really amazing person, you know.
It's very inspiring, and hopefully when I'm an old ass man and I'm in the nursing home, hopefully the nurses will wheel in a computer so I can still live stream.
Well, I'm hoping I'll hold you to that. You know, in a few decades we'll be seeing if Dankey Kang's still knocking about and
Yep.
educating the masses. You know,
The,
but
my grandkids will be like, Grandpa, everybody's on the virtual internet now, and you're still stuck on that old internet. Like, what are you doing? You got to get a VR headset.
yeah, VR still hasn't really kicked off yet. It's too expensive. It's too
That's true.
expensive. Most people can't. Like I don't have like a VR headset. A mate of mine, a friend of mine, actually has a VR headset, the PlayStation one. And
Oh,
holy
yeah.
shit, it's crazy. It's really great. I loved it. It was really fun, but I can't afford that. So, Patreon link somewhere there. Nah, no, I'm joking.
Help make that a
Um,
reality.
I've kept me a VR headset so I can do VR live streams. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anyone needs that, but anyway.
That sort
Yeah.
of
So okay. So
oh, go ahead.
yeah. Sorry. No. I cut you off. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, that sort of leads me into the next question, which is, what lies in store for the future of Marxism today? Your channel left on replay, or any live streams or podcast or VR uh, VR productions.
VR podcasts. Yeah, sure. That'd be really interesting, really useful. Put on the VR headset just so you can listen. Yeah, no, but I will say there's more people that I'm inspired by, more people, more organizations. Your channel is a huge inspiration to me. Come on, seeing you get out and doing this, and just really getting into flow of it. Like yesterday, your stream, you're cracking jokes, you're busting out the bingo, the
Thank you,
bingo
thank you.
board and everything. Oh, it was great. I'm so excited and inspired when I see that. I'm so inspired when I see even the OGs, respect the OGs, Finball, Jason Unruh, Mexi. You gotta have respect for those guys. You gotta respect them. Because they're the forerunners. They're the reason why we're all doing this. Hakeem only made his channel after seeing Finball's channel. He was inspired by him. So that's how you get this. That's how you get your deprograms and all these big these enormous media outlets that are there. But I'm also inspired by these. There's so many great new channels like yourself, like these rising stars that are out there. Just yesterday, I was talking to Notorious Castleman Anna. I'm really inspired by that channel and everything going on there. Love it. Socialist Republicanism for all, Socialism for all, Bestie Marx, Lumpen Maoist News, Chemical Mind, Space Babies, Politics in Command. There's just so many great new channels that are out there inspiring me, and in many ways that's kind of pushing me to do different things. That's pushing me to go further. I wouldn't be out here streaming if I wasn't seeing people like you and Socialism for All doing these streams and actually making it worthwhile. For a long time I just thought that streaming was a waste of time because I was just seeing people like fucking Vosh or the Debate Bros, whatever dipshit, whatever they're calling themselves, weird video game names. It's the Dungeon Lord 420 or whatever, How you're debating just this silly shit about how you should, you really should vote for Joe Biden and Mark should have done it and blah 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 blah. So I was like, it's not even worth doing. Fuck it. But seeing you guys doing it is really, it's really inspiring me. So I'd like to do more of that. I'd like to do more streams. I'd like to do a lot more streams going forward. I'd still like to do the video essays. I'm still working on those. I'm currently working on a video on Nepal.
Awesome.
For yeah, because the revolution happened in Nepal, and it's a video that I'm struggling with regard to the script because it's just so complicated, and there were successes and there were failures, and they in some ways they were successful in the revolution and what they wanted to achieve, or at least what the leadership had wanted to achieve from like the early 2000s, but that wasn't necessarily what the masses might have wanted to achieve. They overthrew this monarchy, and okay, great, brilliant, like 200 years 200 something years of monarchy, and it's this horrible oppressive environment, and that it led to the overthrow of that. That's an amazing historically progressive move, but it isn't exactly the dictatorship of proletariat that people might want. But it seems like the main socialist and communist organizations in Nepal all pretty much are agreeing that they just want what they call multi-party people's democracy, which is, if you were to be cynical, you'd just say it's just social democracy, like a liberal parliamentary social democracy kind of system. So it's one of those things like, are you going to sit there and say like, no, you're wrong for wanting that? That's just capital. It's just going to lead to capitalism. Blah blah blah. It feels kind of shitty to be saying like, oh, that's not good enough. That's not good enough when that's pretty much what the organizations want. But there is still so much disillusionment among the masses in Nepal, and dissatisfaction with what the Maoists have done. And they, like right now, the Prime Minister of Nepal is the leader of, it's Prachanda, the leader of the Maoist party that was fighting, And there's a lot of disillusionment there. So yeah, it's complicated just in terms of how it's going to be framed and stuff. But so yeah, I don't know if it's going to be a video that's going to have a clear, hey, this is great, or hey, this is awful, or whatever. I think it's going to be a lot more complex and nuanced, but I'm working on that anyway. Hopefully we'll get that out in the coming weeks, or at least in the coming months ahead. In the meantime, we'll be doing a lot more streaming and videos, of course, on Left on Replay, which is a fun little channel. I have fun with them. It gives me an excuse to play like video games, or listen to music, or do some silly shit, which I otherwise would probably feel a little bit guilty about doing. So that's gonna be fun. But yeah, those are video essays. Those are video essays. A lot of work goes into them. A lot of time goes into them. That video essay on Zombie by Cranberries, that took like a full month to do. Just like straight working on that like every single day. It's just so much went into that. So it's probably not something where people are gonna, have like weekly videos or anything like that. It's probably going to be realistically, probably like maybe 3 or 4 videos per year. But yeah, anyway, we're gonna keep on doing what we're doing here. Hopefully we'll have more streams. I hope I can get you. I hope I can get you yourself, Anna from yesterday, other comrades on for more streams. We can do this more regularly because I've really enjoyed these streams, and they've been really interesting and fun, and hopefully people are getting something useful out of them. Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure about you, but
Yeah,
I thought they were
yeah.
really good. So
That sounds awesome. I would love to do that in the future, for sure.
yeah,
And
well, we'll make it happen. We'll make it happen.
yeah, and I'm
Hey,
really
what's the plan for yours? No, I want to hear what's the plan for Dankey Kang?
oh yeah, I mean my plan right now is just to keep making my Essentials of Maoism series. Of course, I will be amending my series as I go along, as I learn more and continue to grow more. Recently, I had episode 3 come out, and I made episode 3.1. And I will do that for other episodes as well. If I release an
Mm.
episode, say about the mass line, and I learn more about the mass line, something that I feel like is very important that I missed, I will make an amended episode to that. And so it's a project, and it's something that I hope to continue doing. Right now, it's looking like it's going to go about 24 episodes long, and I pretty much have it all scripted out. There are still, chapters here and there that I haven't completed the script for yet, but I just need to learn more about those topics before I feel like confident enough to put them into a script. But yeah, as of right now, that's what the plan is. Just keep on making those Essentials of Maoism series. I also want to make a video or a stream tackling the issues that I see with modern China, and debunking a lot of the sort of Deng Xiaoping arguments that you see there. And I also want to make a video talking about my old arch nemesis Vosh, just about radical liberalism, debate bros in general, and just sort of I want to put that to bed. I want to put the patriotic socialist grift to bed. I want to put Vosh to bed. I just want to like say my piece and be done with it. Just get it all off my
Yeah.
chest, and so I just want to make videos like that, videos that I feel will be informative. And I'm really trying to step up my game since I've been back from hiatus. I know that especially newcomers to my channel, you'll look back on my old videos, they're very crude, they're very unrefined. And so and there are a lot of lines that I've put out that I no longer agree with. There's a lot of opinions that I no longer agree with. And so I've changed. I've undergone a metamorphosis. And I'm still the same old Dankey. I still have that humor and that levity. But it's not going to just be all goofs and gaffs. Going forward, I want to encase those goofs and gaffs within a more educational, serious framework. And so, even though I do joke around, even though I do have a Donkey Kong avatar, and that is funny and everything.
Never
I
change.
I definitely want to be serious about these ideas. I am serious about these ideas, and I'm serious about Marxism-Leninism, Maoism, and putting forth a revolutionary perspective on the internet. And so, as much as I like to joke around, I am serious about this. And so, yeah, and to that end, I'm very inspired by your channel, Paul. I'm inspired by a lot of individuals: Best D Marks, Space Babies, Notorious Casamang. I'm seeing all these channels coming out now that are just really, really good, super underrated, and they need to be promoted. And
Yeah,
I feel like one of the best
yeah,
things that we can do is to cross promote each other and to collaborate
I
with
agree.
each other, because the internet, just by its very nature, sort of atomizes all of these individual content creators. And so, of course, finding a way to sort of look beyond the limitations of your own channel and be able to come together as a wider community, I feel like is something that we can do and that we are doing. And so I feel like streams like this, and when I go on your channel, these are very, very important. And I would definitely look forward to having future streams with you, future streams with Notorious Casamang, and other principled Marxists going forward. And
Hell yeah.
yeah, I feel
Together, let's do it all together.
yes, absolutely.
Let's get the three together. That'll be kick ass.
And so let's see. We have gone for Lord, we have gone for quite a while now. The stream was
Shit.
originally intended to be about an hour long. So I didn't know
Yeah,
if we
let's leave
wanted
it.
to go ahead and just wrap things up here, but
Yeah, it's probably better. You don't wanna wear out your welcome.
right,
The audience
right,
people are probably sick of listening to me anyway. I don't know about you, but they're
absolutely.
like, "Thank you, you keep going, but pal, shut the fuck up."
Did we want to go over just a couple of questions here, just at the very last minute, maybe about 5 minutes or so?
Oh yeah, that's no problem at all. I don't actually. Did you see questions, or do you have a list of questions that were in the chat? I didn't actually see any,
Let's
um,
see.
or I can't remember any.
Let's see. I am trying to look up some juicy ones here, and I really do appreciate everybody leaving comments in the chat. I am looking at them, I'm analyzing them. So even if you ask a really good question and I don't get around to answering it in this video, I would be more than happy to address them in a future stream or in a future video that I make. Let's see. Somebody is asking if I will go on Deprogram. Or I guess this also applies to you, Paul. Like, do you have an interest in going on Deprogram? Like, I wouldn't have anything against it if I received an invitation.
Yeah, no, I'd definitely be up for it. If I was invited, I would. I'm friendly. I'm friendly with everyone who's on that. They've said to me a couple times, that they want me, but it hasn't happened. There hasn't been like a concrete invitation. It was like, oh yeah, we'd like to have you on, but it hasn't actually, there hasn't been like a okay, come on next week or come on next month or something like that. So it's they said it was they said they have like a list of people, like a massive list of people that they're working through. So yeah, I don't know, maybe at some point in the future, but I think it will be useful for people like yourself or like myself to go on and maybe talk about MLM, because I have noticed that within their audience, there's a lot of people who have some very misguided ideas about what MLM is. They're like, oh, so you're a Maoist, so you want to boil all the babies, huh? So you're one of those guys. No, we do not want to do that. That is very much not what we want to do. Jesus fucking Christ. So yeah, I think it would be actually pretty useful and pretty productive just to have that conversation. But I'm not sure even if they invited me on, if that's the conversation that they might want to have, because I don't know if it would get, like maybe it wouldn't attract kind of a good reception among your audience. I'm not sure, but yeah, definitely I would be open to it if they invited me.
Yeah, I definitely think that a healthy approach is to not turn your nose up at someone just because they're a Marxist-Leninist or a Marxist-Leninist Maoist, and don't just
Of course.
immediately have this knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, you're a Maoist, that means you like to boil babies, or oh, you're a Marxist-Leninist, that means you worship the altar of Deng Xiaoping every single day.
Yeah,
And
or you're a hot or something.
right, right, and so avoiding. Um, unsubstantiated generalizations is something that I feel like people of all tendencies can and should work on. And I feel like it's very easy to just default into these sort of knee-jerk generalizations, especially on the internet. So let's see. Just one more question. Chris Gaming says, advice on moving a very default setting progressive liberal family in a more Marxist direction. I feel like just finding a way, sort of like how Paul mentioned earlier, with the Socialist Republicans, finding a way to avoid overtly Marxist-sounding rhetoric while still perpetuating revolutionary ideas. So tailoring your message to your audience instead of saying, we need to build a dictatorship of the proletariat. Just say, we need to build a society in which the working class assumes control instead of these capitalists who don't care about us. So it's just finding a way to tailor and cater your message to your specific audience while not compromising the revolutionary ideas that you're trying to put out there. You don't want to go too far and adopt reactionary populism, which I see as a mistake that a lot of people make when they're trying to appeal specifically towards conservatives, is that they default to a reactionary populism, and that's not the way to go. You need proletarian consciousness within the working class, especially within the reactionary working class. And so one of the tasks for Marxists is to educate the rear into socialism, educate the backwards reactionary masses into socialism. And so finding a way to do that while not using alienating language is a very important obstacle that we should all try to overcome.
Yeah, definitely. Don't be going out there talking about like the proletariat. Just say working people. That's all they need to do. It's find the limits, figure out where the limits are, and just walk up to those limits. Maybe take one like tiptoe beyond the line. See how that goes. If it goes down well, great. You can keep pushing a little bit further into socialism. Beyond like liberalism and social democracy. But if there's like a backlash, just take a little step back. Just take a step back and take a cooler to breathe out, take a breather, cool off, and relax. If there are pressure points that you can identify, for example, if you've got people in your family who are, like if they're an oppressed group in any way, whether they're like women or LGBT plus people or oppressed nations or people who suffer like racism or anything like that, just find the pressure points, and if you can find a way of showing them how class society is causing their oppression, if you can get into that and explain that, then you're going to be in a much stronger position. It's often much easier to relate to people on those kinds of issues because a lot of working people have been brainwashed into not feeling the exploitation that occurs under capitalism. However, if you talk to a woman, if you talk to an LGBT plus person, talk to a black person, anything like that, and they can talk about their experience of racism, of sexism, of LGBT phobia, things like that, And if you can explain how that relates to private property and how we have these systems of oppression, where it all comes from, if you've read Engels, The Origins of the Family, Private Property in the States, it's going to be very easy to bring people over to a socialist perspective. Of course, as Dankey said very, very well, you don't want to do that using the jargon. You want to do this in a way that relates to people and meets them where they're at. But I generally find that is the way that you reach people and bring them over to a more revolutionary consciousness. I don't find that I haven't had that much success reaching people purely on like a worker basis, just being like, oh, so here's how you're exploited. Let me point out this moment in your day when you're actually doing surplus labor and how the capitalist appropriates that and realizes it in surplus value. But I have found it very easy to speak to people about like national oppression, about racism, about xenophobia, sexism, all these kinds of things from a revolutionary perspective rather than more of like a liberal identity politic kind of way rather than like a proper revolutionary approach to dealing with these identity issues.
Right.
So
And
that's generally a pretty good
yeah, and
yeah.
And to that end, I actually, not to plug myself, but I have a future episode of Essentials of Maoism talking specifically about proletarian intersectionalism that deals with that very issue. So stay tuned for that. But
I'm
yeah,
looking forward to it.
I mean, that about wraps it up for the stream. I feel like everybody has done a great job leaving comments. And like I said, if you leave a comment and I didn't address it, I'd be more than happy to answer those questions in a future video. But yeah, we are running about an hour and 40 some odd minutes. And so I feel like it's about time to go ahead and wrap it up.
I
Nature
think
is
so,
knocking
yeah.
on my door right now. With that, I will uh, leave y'all to that. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Be sure to go check out Marxism Today. Make sure to subscribe to his channel, support him on Patreon, and stay tuned for future productions made on my channel and on his channel and on all the other channels that we've mentioned and plug, and the ones that we have unfortunately forgotten. I'm sure there are several out there. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Dankey King live stream, and I will catch y'all on the next one. Peace out.
Cheers, everyone. For me and Logwith. Take care.